Velcrath stood on the bridge of his warship and watched the human vessel approach through the darkness of space. The ship was small and ugly compared to the elegant curves of Thalassian design. It looked like something a child might build from spare parts. He felt his jaw tighten with frustration as the docking clamps locked into place. For 10,000 years, the Thalassian Empire had conquered the stars. They had defeated every enemy they had ever faced. Their warriors were bred for battle, trained from birth to fight and die with honor. They had no equal in the known galaxy. Until the Collective came. The Collective was a hive mind, a species of cybernetic monsters that consumed everything in their path. They did not negotiate. They did not retreat. They simply absorbed every living thing into their network, turning flesh into machine, turning individuals into drones. In 3 decades of war, they had pushed the mighty Thalassian Empire to the edge of extinction, and now the Galactic Council had sent help. They had sent humans. Velcrath had studied the reports on this species. They came from a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy. They had only discovered faster than light travel 200 years ago. They were soft creatures with fragile bones and weak muscles. They needed to sleep for a third of their short lives. They required constant food and water. A single Thalassian warrior could kill 10 of them in hand-to-hand combat. He could not understand why the Council thought these beings could help. The airlock opened with a hiss, and the humans walked onto his ship. There were 15 of them in total. They wore heavy armor that made them look bigger than they actually were. Their faces were hidden behind dark visors. But Velcrath could see their eyes through the glass. He searched those eyes for fear, and found none. The leader of the group removed her helmet. She was a female, with short brown hair and pale skin. Her name was Diane Porter, and she held the rank of captain in the human military. She walked toward Velcrath with the confidence of someone who had seen battle many times before. "Commander Velcrath," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "Thank you for allowing us aboard your vessel. My people are ready to assist in any way we can." Velcrath looked down at her. He was nearly twice her height, and his 4 arms could have torn her apart in seconds. But she showed no sign of intimidation. She simply waited for his response with patience that seemed almost unnatural. "I will be honest with you, Captain," Velcrath said. "I do not believe your species can help us. The Collective has destroyed our greatest warriors. They have taken worlds that we defended with millions of soldiers. What can 15 humans do against such an enemy?" Diane Porter smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but something about it made Velcrath uncomfortable. "Perhaps you should let us show you," she said. Over the next several days, Velcrath observed the humans as they prepared for deployment. They would be joining the assault on Nexar 7, a planet that had become the most brutal battlefield in the war. The Thalassian forces had tried to take it back 17 times. Each attempt had ended in disaster. The humans did not seem concerned. Lieutenant Jake Morrison was the tactical officer. He spent hours studying maps of the planet, marking positions and calculating distances. When Velcrath asked him about his plan, Jake simply said they would adapt to whatever they found on the ground. This was not how Thalassian warriors operated. They believed in detailed plans and careful preparation. The human approach seemed almost reckless. Sergeant Amy Reyes led the combat squad. She was smaller than the others, with dark hair pulled back in a tight knot. Velcrath watched her in the training room one evening. She fought against 3 holographic enemies at once, moving with a speed and aggression that surprised him. When one of the holograms struck her in the ribs, she did not fall back. She grabbed its arm, broke it, and used the broken limb as a weapon against the other 2. When the session ended, she noticed Velcrath watching from the doorway. "Something wrong, Commander?" she asked. "You fight like you have nothing to lose," he said. Amy wiped sweat from her forehead and shrugged. "Everyone has something to lose. That is why we fight so hard to protect it." Velcrath did not understand what she meant. The night before the deployment, Captain Porter came to his quarters. She brought a bottle of some human drink called whiskey and offered him a glass. He accepted it out of politeness. The liquid burned his throat in a way that was not entirely unpleasant. "You do not think we will survive tomorrow," Porter said. It was not a question. Velcrath considered lying but decided against it. No, I do not. Nexar 7 has killed the finest warriors my empire has ever produced. Your soldiers are brave, but bravery alone will not be enough. Porter took a drink from her own glass. You are probably right. Some of my people will die tomorrow. Maybe all of them. Maybe me too. And this does not trouble you? She looked at him with those strange human eyes. They were small and round, nothing like the large golden eyes of his own species. But there was something in them that he could not identify, something old and deep and waiting. Of course it troubles me, she said. Every death troubles me. But that is not a reason to stop fighting. It is a reason to fight harder. Velcroth did not sleep that night. He stood at the viewport of his ship and watched the stars slowly turn. In a few hours, he would lead his warriors into battle alongside these strange creatures from a distant world. He had fought in 100 campaigns and had never once felt doubt, but something about the humans unsettled him. It was not their strength, or their tactics, or their weapons. It was something else. Something he could not name. When he looked into their eyes, he saw a kind of determination that went beyond anything he had ever witnessed. It was not the determination of warriors seeking glory. It was something darker. Something hungrier. For the first time in his long life, Velcrath wondered if he truly understood what war meant. The transport ships launched at dawn, carrying Thalassian and human soldiers together toward the burning surface of Nexar 7. Velcrath sat across from Captain Porter in the crowded hold. The human soldiers around her were checking their weapons and speaking to each other in low voices. Some of them were laughing, on their way to what might be their deaths. Velcrath felt something cold move through his chest. He did not know what to call it then. He had never felt it before. His people had removed such feelings from their bloodline thousands of years ago, believing them to be weaknesses unfit for true warriors. But as the transport descended through fire and smoke toward the battlefield below, he began to understand that his people had been wrong. The feeling was not weakness. It was wisdom. It was the beginning of fear. The transport hit the ground hard, and the doors blew open before the dust had settled. Velcroth was the first one out. His weapon raised and ready. Plasma fire streaked through the air around him, bright green bolts that could burn through armor like paper. He dove behind a collapsed wall and began returning fire. The collective drones were everywhere. They poured out of the ruined buildings like insects. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Each one had once been a living creature. Some other species that the collective had consumed and transformed. Now, they were just machines wrapped in dead flesh, moving with perfect coordination toward a single goal. Kill everything that was not part of the network. Velcrath watched his warriors take their positions. They moved with the precision of 10,000 years of training, forming defensive lines and establishing overlapping fields of fire. This was how the Thalassian Empire had always fought. Controlled, disciplined, honorable. The humans did not fight this way. Sergeant Amy Reyes was the first one off the transport after Velcrath. She did not look for cover. She did not assess the battlefield. She simply raised her weapon and started walking forward, firing as she went. The drones that came at her fell one after another, but more kept coming. She kept walking. A plasma bolt caught her in the left shoulder. Velcrath saw the impact, saw the flash of light as the superheated energy burned through her armor and into her flesh. He expected her to fall. Any Thalassian warrior would have retreated to receive medical attention. That was the logical thing to do. Amy did not retreat. She pulled a small canister from her belt and sprayed something white and foamy into the wound. The foam hardened instantly, sealing the injury. Then she shifted her rifle to her right hand, aimed at the drone that had shot her, and blew its head apart. She was smiling. Velcroth had seen many things in his centuries of war. He had seen courage and cowardice, triumph and tragedy. But he had never seen someone smile after being wounded. He did not understand it. He was not sure he wanted to understand it. Lieutenant Jake Morrison was coordinating the squad from a position near the transports. He spoke into his communicator with a calm voice. directing his soldiers like pieces on a game board. Velcrath listened to his orders and felt his confusion grow. Kevin, take your fire team around the left flank. Draw their attention away from the main group. A young human named Kevin Dawson responded immediately. Copy that. Moving now. Velcrath grabbed Morrison's arm. You are sending them into an exposed position. They will be surrounded within minutes. Morrison looked at him with those strange human eyes. I know. That is the point. While the drones focus on Kevin's team, Amy can push through the center and secure the landing zone. Your soldiers will die. Maybe. But the mission will succeed. He said it so simply, so calmly, as if he were discussing the weather instead of the lives of his own people. Velcrath released his arm and stepped back. He did not know what to say. Kevin Dawson led his fire team into the open, drawing enemy fire exactly as Morrison had predicted. The drones turned toward them, attracted by the movement and the noise. Kevin's team was outnumbered 20-1. But they did not retreat. They dug in behind whatever cover they could find and started shooting. One of them fell in the first minute. Another was hit in the leg and collapsed. Kevin grabbed him by the collar and dragged him behind a broken wall, still firing with his other hand. A drone got close enough to swing at him with a bladed arm. Kevin ducked under the strike, shoved the barrel of his rifle into the drone's chest, and pulled the trigger. Then he did something that Velcrath would never forget. He stood up, fully exposed to enemy fire, and screamed at the drones. It was not a war cry or a call for reinforcements. It was just a raw human scream, full of rage and defiance. He wanted them to see him. He wanted them to come for him. They did. And while they focused on Kevin and his dying fire team, Amy Reyes led the rest of the squad through the center of the enemy line. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the landing zone was secure. The Thalassian warriors had performed admirably, holding their positions with the discipline that their training demanded. But it was the humans who had broken the enemy line. It was the humans who had taken the risks that no Thalassian commander would ever approve. 6 humans had been wounded. 2 were in critical condition. None had been killed, but Velcrath suspected that was only because the fight had ended when it did. He found Amy Reyes sitting on a pile of rubble, drinking water from a metal container. Her shoulder was wrapped in bandages now, proper medical treatment replacing the emergency foam, but she seemed unconcerned about the injury. She was watching the sky, where smoke rose from a dozen different fires. You were shot, Velcrath said. Yes. You did not stop fighting. No. He sat down beside her, his massive frame making the rubble shift beneath him. Among my people, an injured warrior is expected to fall back. Fighting while wounded is considered foolish. It reduces effectiveness and risks further injury. Amy turned to look at him. Her face was dirty and tired, but her eyes were bright. Among my people, falling back is a luxury we cannot always afford. Sometimes you have to keep fighting no matter how much it hurts, because if you stop, the people behind you might die. And if you die, she shrugged with her good shoulder, then someone else keeps fighting. That is how we do it. We do not stop until the job is done, or until there is no one left to do it. Velcrath thought about her words for a long time. His people had always believed that individual warriors were precious, that each life had value and should not be wasted. But watching the humans fight, he began to see a different philosophy. To them, every life had value precisely because they were willing to spend it for something greater than themselves. It was beautiful in a way he had not expected. It was also deeply, profoundly disturbing. That night, as the medical teams worked on the wounded and the soldiers prepared for the next day's advance, Velcrath walked among the humans. He watched them eat their rations and check their equipment. He heard them talking and laughing despite the horrors they had witnessed. One of them was playing music on a small device, a strange human melody that sounded both sad and hopeful at the same time. Kevin Dawson was alive. His fire team had taken the worst of the enemy assault, but somehow all of them had survived. When Velcrath approached him, the young human was cleaning his weapon with careful attention. You almost died today, Velcrath said. Kevin looked up at him and grinned. Almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, sir. Velcrath did not understand the reference, but he understood the meaning behind it. To this human, survival was not the measure of success. Victory was. And victory sometimes required getting as close to death as possible without actually crossing the line. He walked back to his own quarters and sat in the darkness for hours. The cold feeling in his chest had grown stronger. He had a name for it now, found in the ancient texts of his people. His ancestors had called it terror, and they had removed it from the Thalassian bloodline because they believed it made warriors weak. But Velcroth was beginning to think his ancestors had been wrong. Terror was not weakness. It was simply the recognition of something genuinely dangerous. And the humans were very, very dangerous. The campaign on Nexar 7 stretched into weeks. Every day brought new battles, new casualties, new horrors. The collective fought with the mindless determination of machines, throwing endless waves of drones at the Allied positions. The Thalassian warriors held their ground with honor and skill. But it was the humans who kept pushing forward. Always forward. No matter what it cost. Velcroth fought alongside them every day. He watched them bleed and suffer and die. And with each passing battle, the feeling of terror in his chest grew stronger. Corporal Matt Finley was the first human to fall in combat. They were advancing through a destroyed city when a mine hidden in the rubble exploded beneath him. The blast took both of his legs below the knee. Velcroth saw him go down and expected him to lie there waiting for medical evacuation. That was what any rational being would do. Matt did not wait. He dragged himself to a position behind a broken wall, his ruined legs leaving dark trails of blood on the concrete. He propped his rifle against the stone and began firing at the approaching drones. His face was pale and twisted with pain, but his hands were steady. His aim was true. "Get me more ammunition," he called out to a passing soldier. "I can still fight." Velcroth ran to him. "You need medical attention immediately. You will die if you do not stop the bleeding." Matt looked up at him with eyes that burned with something fierce and terrible. "I will die anyway if those things get through. Give me a tourniquet and more rounds." "I am not done yet." A medic reached them a few seconds later and began working on Matt's wounds. But even as the medic wrapped his legs and injected him with pain medication, Matt kept shooting. He killed 11 more drones before blood loss finally made him pass out. When the stretcher bearers carried him away, his finger was still curled around the trigger. Velcroth stood in the blood-soaked rubble and tried to understand what he had just witnessed. A man had lost his legs and refused to stop fighting. Not because he did not feel pain. Velcroth had seen the agony in his eyes. He felt everything. He simply refused to let it stop him. 2 days later, Specialist Lisa Tran was captured. Her squad had been separated from the main force during a collective counterattack. By the time reinforcements arrived, she was the only one left alive, and the drones were dragging her toward one of their conversion facilities. They were going to turn her into one of them, absorb her into the network, erase everything that made her human. Lieutenant Jake Morrison led the rescue mission personally. He took volunteers only, soldiers who understood that they might not come back. Every human in the camp stepped forward. Morrison had to choose 12 from among them. They found Lisa inside the facility, strapped to a metal table while machines cut into her body. The collective had already begun the conversion process. Half of her left side was covered in cybernetic implants, wires and circuits replacing flesh and bone. Her left eye had been replaced with a glowing red sensor. She was still conscious. She was still fighting. When the rescue team cut her loose, she grabbed a weapon from the nearest soldier and started shooting at the drones around her. She fought with one arm and one eye, her body half machine but her mind still completely human. She did not stop until the last drone in the facility was destroyed. Afterward, the medics said they could remove most of the cybernetics, but some of them had bonded too deeply with her nervous system. She would carry parts of the collective inside her for the rest of her life. Lisa asked if she could still fight. When the medics said yes, she smiled and asked when she could return to duty. Velcroth was there when she made that decision. He watched her face, looking for signs of trauma or despair. She had been violated in the worst way imaginable, her body torn apart and reshaped against her will. Any Thalassian warrior would have requested honorable discharge after such an experience. Many would have chosen ritual suicide, rather than live with the contamination of enemy technology inside them. Lisa just wanted to get back to the fight. She asked the technical officers if they could interface her new cybernetics with the squad's tactical network. She wanted to use the collective's own technology against them. Within a week, she was back on the front lines, her half-metal body moving with unnatural speed and precision. Some of the Thalassian warriors were disturbed by her presence. They saw the cybernetics and thought of the enemy. But the humans welcomed her back like she had never left. To them, what mattered was not what she looked like. What mattered was that she was still one of them, still fighting for the same cause. Velcrath began to understand something about humans that he had never grasped before. They did not fight for glory or honor or conquest. They fought for each other. Every human soldier carried a burden of love and loyalty that drove them forward through any obstacle. They would endure any pain, suffer any wound, face any horror, as long as it meant protecting the people they cared about. This was what made them so terrifying. The Thalassians had evolved as apex predators on their homeworld. They had never known what it meant to be prey. They had never developed the desperate, savage survival instinct that came from millions of years of being hunted. Humans had. For most of their history, they had been small and weak compared to the animals around them. They had survived by learning to fight together, to sacrifice for each other, to keep going when any rational creature would have given up. They had turned their weakness into strength, their fear into fuel. And when they finally became the dominant species on their planet, they turned those same instincts on each other. They spent thousands of years fighting wars against their own kind, developing weapons and tactics designed to kill beings exactly as clever and adaptable as themselves. Every other species the Thalassians had encountered had fought wars against creatures different from themselves. Humans had fought wars against humans. They had learned to kill the most dangerous prey in the universe, each other. Velcrath sat alone in his quarters that night and thought about what this meant. His people had conquered the galaxy by being bigger, stronger, and more disciplined than everyone else. But size and strength meant nothing against an enemy willing to pay any price for victory. Discipline was useless against opponents who could adapt faster than any plan could anticipate. For the first time, he understood why the Galactic Council had sent humans to help fight the collective. It was not because humans were strong. It was because humans were relentless. They did not know how to give up. They did not understand the concept of acceptable defeat. They just kept fighting until they won, or until every last one of them was dead. And somehow, impossibly, that made them the most powerful force in the galaxy. The terror in Velcrath's chest had become a constant companion. He no longer tried to suppress it. Instead, he let it remind him of a simple truth. He was fighting alongside creatures who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to survive against impossible odds. He should have felt reassured. Instead, he felt more afraid than ever. The war on Nexar 7 had reached its final phase. Intelligence reports indicated that the collective's central command node was located deep beneath the planet's surface, protected by layers of defenses that had destroyed every Thalassian assault force sent against them. If the node could be destroyed, the collective forces in the entire sector would collapse. The war that had lasted 30 years might finally end. Captain Diane Porter called a meeting of all senior officers, both human and Thalassian. Velcrath attended with growing unease. He had learned to dread these meetings. The humans always had plans, and their plans always involved sacrifice on a scale that made his blood run cold. Porter stood before a holographic display of the underground tunnels leading to the command node. The network was vast and complex, filled with choke points and kill zones and automated defenses. The collective had designed it specifically to be impenetrable. "We cannot brute force our way through," Porter said. "The defenses are too strong and too well positioned. We would lose our entire force before we got halfway to the node." Velcrath felt a moment of relief. Perhaps the humans had finally encountered a problem they could not solve through sheer willpower and bloodshed. Then Porter continued, "So we are going to do it differently. We are going to map the defenses by sending probing forces into the tunnels. Each probe will gather intelligence on enemy positions and relay that information back before being destroyed. Once we have enough data, We can identify weaknesses and plan our final assault. The Thalassian officers looked confused. One of them raised his hand. Captain, you say each probe will be destroyed. Are you suggesting we send soldiers into the tunnels, knowing they will not return? Porter's face did not change. Yes. That is exactly what I am suggesting. The room went silent. Velcrath felt the terror in his chest twist into something sharper, something colder. He had seen humans sacrifice themselves in the heat of battle, making split-second decisions that no one could have planned for. But this was different. This was calculated. This was deliberate. We have run the numbers, Porter said. Based on the complexity of the defense network, we estimate that we will need approximately 12 probing missions to gather sufficient intelligence. Each mission will consist of 50 soldiers. We expect total loss on most missions. She paused to let the numbers sink in. 600 soldiers, she said. That is the price of mapping those tunnels. Once we have the map, we can send a final assault force of 50 through the weakest points in the defense. Some of them will survive, enough to reach the node and destroy it. A Thalassian commander stood up, his scales flushing dark with anger. This is not warfare. This is murder. You are asking us to send our warriors to certain death. Porter looked at him with those calm, patient eyes that Velcroth had learned to fear. Commander, your warriors have been dying on this planet for 3 years. How many have you lost? 20,000? 30? And you are no closer to ending this war than you were when you started. She turned back to the holographic display. 600 lives will end this. 600 lives will save the millions who would die if this war continues. It is not a good bargain. It is not a bargain anyone should have to make. But it is the only bargain we have. Velcrath stood up slowly. His legs felt unsteady beneath him, as if the ground was tilting. You speak of sending your own soldiers to die, as if it means nothing to you, as if they are just numbers, to be counted and spent. Porter turned to face him. For the first time, he saw something in her eyes other than calm calculation. He saw pain. Deep, old pain. The kind that came from making decisions like this before. Every soldier I send into those tunnels has a name, she said quietly. Every one of them has a family, friends, dreams they will never fulfill. I know this because I make myself know it. I read their files. I learn their stories. I carry them with me. She stepped closer to Velcrath. This is what humans do, Commander. We feel the weight of every death, and we keep moving anyway. We do not forget. We do not become numb. We just learn to bear the burden and keep fighting. Because if we stop, the deaths mean nothing. The first probing mission launched the next morning. Velcrath watched from the command center as 50 human soldiers marched into the tunnels. They knew they were not coming back. They had written letters to their families the night before. Some of them had made recordings, messages to be delivered after their deaths. None of them had refused the mission. Velcrath asked Lieutenant Jake Morrison why they were willing to go. Morrison was preparing for the third probing mission, checking his equipment with the same calm efficiency he always showed. Because someone has to, Morrison said. And if it is going to be someone, it might as well be us. At least this way, our deaths accomplish something. But you could refuse. You could demand that someone else go. Morrison smiled. It was a sad smile. Tired and knowing. Commander, do you think any of us want to die? Do you think we are not afraid? We are terrified. Every human in this camp is terrified. But we have learned something that your people never had to learn. He finished checking his rifle and looked up at Velcrath. Fear is not a reason to stop. Fear is just information. It tells you that what you are doing matters enough to be scary. And the things that matter are worth dying for. The probing missions continued for 6 days. Each one went exactly as Porter had predicted. Soldiers entered the tunnels, engaged the enemy defenses, and transmitted data back to the command center until they were overwhelmed. The few survivors of early missions were absorbed into later ones. Their experience used to push deeper into the network. By the 5th day, They had lost 412 soldiers. The command center was filled with data, holographic displays showing every trap and turret and choke point in the tunnel system. The final assault was almost ready. Velcrath watched the 6th probing mission depart. Sergeant Amy Reyes was leading it, her cybernetic arm gleaming in the dim light of the underground entrance. She saw him standing there, and nodded. "Wish us luck, Commander." "I do not believe in luck." She grinned. "Neither do I. But it is a nice thought anyway." Then she was gone, swallowed by the darkness of the tunnels. Velcrath turned away and walked back to the command center. The terror in his chest had grown so large that he could barely breathe. He had watched hundreds of humans walk to their deaths with courage that defied all logic, all reason, all instinct for self-preservation. And now he understood the truth that had been hiding behind his fear all along. The humans were not fearless. They were terrified. They felt every moment of horror and despair that the universe threw at them, but they had learned to turn that fear into something else, something that made them unstoppable. They had learned to be afraid and keep fighting anyway. That was the true horror of humanity. Not their violence, not their aggression, not their willingness to die. It was their ability to feel everything and still move forward, to carry the weight of their own suffering and use it as fuel. They were not warriors, they were survivors. And they would do whatever it took to survive. Whatever it took. The final assault began at midnight. 43 soldiers remained. They had started with 650, and now less than 50 were left to finish what the others had begun. Amy Reyes was among them, having survived the 6th probing mission by sheer determination and luck. Jake Morrison was there too, his face hollow and his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Captain Diane Porter had insisted on leading the assault herself. Velcrath stood at the entrance to the tunnels and watched them prepare. He had asked to join the mission, but Porter had refused. "Your people need you alive," she had said. "The Thalassian Empire needs to know what happened here. What we did. What it cost." So he stood and watched as 43 humans walked into the darkness, carrying the hopes of 2 species on their shoulders. The command center tracked their progress through the tunnels. The probing missions had done their work well. Porter's team moved through the defensive network with precision, avoiding the traps that had killed so many before them. But the collective was not passive. As soon as the humans reached the inner tunnels, the drones began to swarm. Velcrath listened to the battle through the communication channel. He heard gunfire and explosions, screams and curses and orders shouted over the chaos. He heard soldiers dying, their voices cutting off mid-sentence as the enemy overwhelmed them. And he heard them keep fighting. "Keep moving," Porter's voice crackled through the speakers. "We are almost there. Do not stop for anything." A soldier named Danny Cole had been part of the final assault. He was young, barely out of training, but he had volunteered without hesitation. Now Velcrath heard his voice rising above the noise of battle. "I am out of ammunition. Going hand to hand." The sounds that followed were difficult to listen to. Velcrath heard the wet impact of fists on metal and flesh, the grinding screech of combat knives cutting through cybernetic armor. He heard Danny Cole grunting with effort, shouting in defiance, refusing to fall even as the drones closed in around him. Then silence. Then Porter's voice again, quiet but steady. "Danny is down. Keep moving." 13 soldiers reached the command node. Velcrath watched on the tactical display as their signals clustered around a single point deep beneath the surface. The node was a massive structure, a central hub that coordinated all collective activity in the sector. Destroying it would not just end the battle for Nexar 7. It would cripple the collective's ability to wage war for years, maybe decades. The explosives they carried were powerful enough to vaporize the entire chamber. There would be no escape. Anyone inside when the charges detonated would die. "Commander Velcrath." Porter's voice came through the channel, clear despite the static and interference. "Are you listening?" Quote, "I am here." "Good. I want you to know something before we finish this." There was a pause. In the background, Velcrath could hear the sounds of fighting, the desperate last stand of the remaining soldiers as they held off the drones. My people did not come here because we wanted to die. We came because we wanted to live. We wanted our families to live. We wanted our children to grow up in a galaxy free from the collective. Every soldier who died in these tunnels died for that future. Not for glory, not for honor. Velcrath felt something burning in his eyes. He did not understand the sensation. His people had removed the ability to cry thousands of years ago, along with terror and despair and all the other weaknesses they thought held them back. But in that moment, he understood what they had lost. "Captain Porter," he said, "it has been an honor to fight alongside you." "The honor was ours, Commander. Tell the galaxy what humans can do. Tell them we were afraid. Tell them we did it anyway." The channel went silent. 3 seconds later, the tactical display flashed white as the explosives detonated. The signal from the command node disappeared. The collective drones across the entire planet froze, their connection to the network severed. Within hours, they would shut down completely. Mindless machines without a mind to guide them. The war was over. Velcroth stood alone in the command center for a long time. The Thalassian officers around him were celebrating, cheering the victory that their people had sought for 30 years. But he could not join them. He could only think of the 650 humans who had walked into those tunnels and the 13 who had reached the end. He thought of Danny Cole, fighting with his bare hands when his ammunition ran out. He thought of Matt Finley, shooting from behind a broken wall, with no legs left beneath him. He thought of Lisa Tran, carrying pieces of the enemy inside her body and still finding the courage to fight. He thought of Diane Porter, calm and patient to the very end, carrying the weight of every death she had ordered and still moving forward. 3 weeks later, Velcrath stood on the observation deck of his warship and watched the human fleet prepare to depart. The collective had collapsed across the sector. Just as Porter had predicted, the war that had seemed endless was finally coming to an end. A human transport docked with his ship, carrying a small delegation. Among them was Lieutenant Jake Morrison, one of the few survivors of the final assault. He walked onto the deck with a slight limp, a reminder of the wound he had taken in the tunnels. "Commander Velcrath," he said, "I have been asked to deliver something to you." He held out a small metal case. Inside was a medal, a simple bronze disc on a ribbon. The human military gave these to soldiers who showed exceptional courage in battle. "Captain Porter put your name on the commendation list before the final assault," Morrison said. "She wanted you to have this. She said you earned it." Velcrath took the medal and held it in his palm. It was such a small thing. Such a simple thing. But it meant more to him than any honor his own people had ever given him. "She was a remarkable person," he said quietly. "She was human," Morrison replied. "That is all. Just human." He turned to leave, then stopped at the airlock door. "Commander, can I ask you something? You have fought alongside us for months. You have seen what we can do, what we are willing to sacrifice. What do you think of us now?" Velcrath considered the question carefully. He remembered the terror he had felt watching humans fight, the horror of seeing them march into certain death with their eyes open and their hearts full of fear. He remembered the cold understanding that had settled into his bones as he realized what humanity truly was. "I think," he said slowly, "that I am very grateful you chose to fight beside us, instead of against us." Morrison smiled. It was the same smile Amy Reyes had worn on her way into the tunnels, knowing she might not return. The smile of someone who was afraid and kept moving anyway. "That is probably wise," he said. "Goodbye, Commander. Maybe we will fight together again someday." The human fleet departed an hour later, jumping to hyperspace and disappearing into the endless dark. Velcrath remained at the viewport, watching the stars where they had been. He had spent his entire life believing that the Thalassians were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. He had been wrong. The greatest warriors were small and soft and fragile, creatures who broke easily and died young, and felt every moment of pain the universe gave them. And they kept fighting anyway. That was the lesson of humanity. That was what the galaxy would learn in the years to come. You did not need to be strong to win. You did not need to be fearless. You just needed to find something worth fighting for and refuse to stop until the fight was done. Velcrath looked down at the medal in his hand. He would keep it for the rest of his life. A reminder of the humans he had fought beside and the terror he had learned to respect. A reminder that sometimes, the most frightening thing in the universe is not a monster or a machine. Sometimes, it is just a human being who has decided not to give up.